kick off. So thank you very much for everyone joining this event. My name is Toyo. I'm kind of a host and for this event. Today we have two different sections. One is the first half, where we discuss the culture similarity and differences between Germany and Japan, and covering a little bit Singapore. And the rest of the half, we will make the floor open for anyone who wants to address your opinions or share your experiences, right? So yeah, let me just introduce myself. So my name is Toyo again. So I'm a Japanese and living in Singapore over 3.5 years right now. And I study English in Dublin, Ireland. So you may feel a little bit Irish accents influences. I'm not quite sure, but and also, I need to say one thing is that I'm wearing a braces on my teeth, and some of the words I'm not very comfortable myself to pronounce, like S sound or T sound. I'm very Japanese to be honest, to say that, to excuse first at the beginning, but just bear it with me. I hope it's not annoying. Yeah. So one very the important thing to mention is that I'm only one Japanese in my office. So it's quite a unique experience because a lot of Japanese people living in Singapore, they are working for a Japanese company. And I guess they are like a Japanese expat, and it's quite surrounded by a different Japanese people, but I'm only one Japanese. It just happened to be working in the international company and experiencing some unique experience. So I decided to share my experience to mainly to Japanese people, and by posting in LinkedIn. So that was the beginning of my social media use. But these days, I'm not only just to Japanese, but for expanding a little bit my audience target to the people who are interested in knowing, working in international environments. So the culture gap is the key topic for me. So today, this event is also about a culture gap. So I invited two speakers into this event, and I will let them to introduce by themselves rather than I introduce. So let me start from Kay. Yeah, I will pass it to Kay. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you. So good evening. Happy happy mid of the week, everybody. My name is Nozaki. You can just call me Kay. I'm working for a tech company as a senior marketing evangelist that covers the entire Asia Pacific region. So it actually counts 14 countries. On the east side, it starts from Australia and New Zealand all the way to India on the west side. And I'm working on keynote speaker role, content marketing, and market research, and other research project. And outside of my job, I'm actually really focusing on my effort around LinkedIn Creator program that was initiated by LinkedIn Japan editorial team, where they hire people, those are vocal and we're really keen to share lots of stories. So I'm in that position and really enjoying lots of the conversation with lots of people, including Toyo here, who kindly invited me as a speaker today. So really honored to be here. And also I'm leading a project of multicultural diversity and inclusion project in my company as well, where I'm really passionate about it, simply because, as you can see in my kind of a background at the bottom of this page, I'm actually having some sort of really short experience to live in the United States when I was a kid. But after that, when I started working, I've been always working for American companies, and it's more than 20 years now. And I really enjoy working for 14 different countries across Asia Pacific now. And all of that experience, I'm really happy and really embracing this opportunity, which might be rare for many of the Japanese business people, So this time, I'm really excited to be here to share some experience, exchange some thoughts and ideas, and having lots of discussion. And all having said that, I'm still located in Tokyo, Japan. I'm not in Singapore, unfortunately, but yeah, I'm quite keen to be among the having lots of friends in Asia Pacific. So I think this is also for Toyo and Vincent after the event, but we'll all welcome the connection with all of you after the event to be connected on LinkedIn. Thank you. And Vincent, over to you.
Thank you, Kay. Thank you, Toyo. Yeah, my name is Vincent. I'm from Germany. Currently, I'm studying, or I just started my finance at the National University of Singapore. And I got to have contact with Toyo, and he proposed this idea to have this talk after we were introduced by a common contact of us. And we quickly discovered that we both share a passion for cultures, and especially culture gaps in a way. Because after living in Japan for more than 2 years, and I actually started my working life as an intern in NTT Data, which is probably, as most of you know, a very big Japanese company. So I started my business life in Japan and then moved on to Germany to continue my journey there. I noticed many differences between Germany and Japan, but also many similarities. And I wanted to discover this a little bit closer. And I ended up writing my complete bachelor thesis about this topic in a business context. So I discovered, I looked for work cultural gaps in a way. So where do the German and the Japanese culture clash a little bit? And before that, I also had some other academic contact with Japan. So from here on, I will mostly lead the first part of this presentation and this discussion. As I mentioned before, even though this looks a lot like a presentation right now, this is still supposed to be open and interactive. So we strongly encourage you to post any questions or any comments you have into the chat. Toyo takes a little bit of a moderator role here, and he will pass these questions on to me and Kay as well. And yeah, I will guide you through this, and we will get to know some of the Hofstede dimensions and high and low context cultures a little bit. Yeah, so let's start. Let's actually talk culture. I came up with all these titles, so I hope you enjoy them. So let's start off first with what even would culture be. If I asked now, probably everyone would have slightly different definitions and slightly different opinions. And actually, there is not one definition for culture, but a very common one, and I shortened this a little bit here, would be culture consists of patterns, explicit and implicit, of and for behavior. That on one hand can be considered as products of action, on the other hand as conditioning elements for future action. This is defined by Nancy Adler, professor of organizational behavior. And what this means is that we look at culture as we perceive it now, based on past actions that shaped a nationality or a cultural group. It doesn't have to be nationality, right? And their values, their symbols, their beliefs. And this culture today is implicit and shapes future actions of these particular groups. It's very broad, as culture is as well. And it's not super precise, but just to have everyone on a common page, what a possible definition for culture could be. So let's start, actually not with Hofstede I mentioned, but with Edward T. Hall and with the high and low context culture. I call it the art of communicating, because this is mainly concerned with communication. So as you can see here, how much information is conveyed in the context of social interactions. On the one hand, we have low context cultures. In these cultures, everything is, or not everything, but a lot of things are not communicated in context. What does that mean? You would express everything directly by words. Your words are the things you mean. There's less hidden meaning. You don't have to read so much out of body language. And what is very common for these kind of cultures is that a confrontation is anticipated, which means you say something, the other person says another thing, and you contradict. You start a discussion. This also leads to, because everything is stated explicitly, that rules are quite explicit, which means if you come somewhere, you can be expected that if you do something wrong, people will tell you. or if you cannot do something at all, they will tell you beforehand. On the other hand, we would have the high context cultures. These are very indirect in communication. And for example, a lot of body language is used here. The reason for that is that you have to know, you have to read the room, right? You have to understand the context of the things being said. Even though words are used, they are not the whole picture. You have to read between the lines. You have to understand the person talking to you. How is your status compared to their status? What does that mean? In these cultures, confrontation is usually avoided. So you barely say no directly. Low context cultures say no a lot. And also this leads to having many implicit rules, right? So while the low context cultures, they directly tell you, you cannot do that. This is not necessarily true for high context cultures. You have to understand yourself what you did wrong, how you did it wrong, and how to improve in the future. So originally we planned on maybe asking you what you think the order here may be, but I would assume most people would have guessed anyway. So I will go ahead and reveal it anyways. On the low end, we have Germany. Then we have Singapore right on the middle, right from the middle, but not super to the right, to the high context cultures. And then we have Japan. And as you can see here, we already have the first problem, you may say. While Germany is on the super left. Actually, Germany and German-speaking countries like Switzerland and Austria are considered to have the lowest context cultures worldwide. Japan is considered to be one, if not the highest context culture. Singapore definitely has a high context culture, even though it is not as extreme as Japan. And we will come back to these concepts a little bit, and we will cross-reference them, especially when it comes to communication, since this is a topic which is basically overlaying every interaction between these cultures.
Do you want to launch
so far?
Do you want to launch the polling or later?
Oh yeah, of course. We have another polling for this. And since you now learned a little bit on what high and low context cultures are, we want to ask you in a poll where you think you would be more comfortable. Would it be more the low context cultures, direct communication, you know what you hear, or would it be the high context communication? Try to avoid confrontation, speak a little bit between the lines. I'm biased.
Yeah, I will do. Okay, relaunch the poll. Sorry, I got some technical issues. Okay, I guess now I'm launching the polling. Yep.
Yeah.
Can I also answer?
Sure.
Okay.
I will answer myself as well. But I think most
Yes.
people will know where we'll go, right?
Yeah, it's not like a survey type of things because it depends on what I mean, you know, who we are in this group, right? But it just, you know, it's a fun to have this survey.
Yeah, just to be clear here, we don't ask you where you come from. We ask you where you think you would be more comfortable.
Yeah.
So this is your personal feeling. Since something I didn't really mention before, culture obviously is very subjective in a way, right? Everyone would have a personal culture, especially when it comes. Oh yeah, most people are actually more confident in low context.
Yeah, interesting.
I would assume this is because most people, or a majority, if I click through the names here, majority would be from Asian countries. But Asian countries.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Right. I'm just looking at the Zoom participants. It's quite well diversified, right? I can see more Asian people, right? If I just understand them from the names. But interesting, right? Because low context is more like German type of culture, but people prefer low context.
Oh, you're right. Actually, yeah.
Although we are belonging to high context culture. Obviously, we have a lot of Japanese people joining, right? But the result is low context is higher than high context. Interesting.
Sure. So I can speak open with you with most of you.
Okay, let me stop sharing. Okay. Right.
yeah, if you have any questions regarding these concepts or anything, like I said, please type it in the chat, or any opinion, maybe a theory why most people here may prefer the low context. Do you have any idea why this may be? So feel free to type anything in the chat. We are happy. By chat, I mean the event chat mostly. John, thank you for typing. But
just a quick comment about this context things. I think indeed, in the preparation, Toyo and Vincent and myself briefly talk about the body language thing that actually put its characteristic as part of the high context, right? Because I feel like, many people might imagine that lower context culture tend to use this kind of body language to be clear with what you're exactly trying to say, while higher context societies tend to have, not really moving, right? And I think one thing that I might wanted to point it out is that maybe in the higher context society or the culture, when we say body language, that may be like how your eyes move, right? Because I think in Japanese, there's even the proverb that says, "Eye says more than mouth does." So how you use your eye as a expression is really the key. And when it comes to body language in Japanese, at least, I don't know how about the other Asian countries, but I think body language really varies if you're using your arms or entire body or just using your eyes as a signal, right? So I think that's a really interesting point as well.
Yeah, I think a good way to demonstrate this would be if you ask something to me which I don't like, and I would say no, then I would say yes, or I would say yes. So which is the easiest to understand. So it's, even though the very high context cultures like Japan or many Asian countries don't use a lot of body language, the body language itself is more high context than actually using the words. Yeah. Fritz, yeah, you have a question.
Yes, I'd like to put a question. Hello together. Is there any difference or is it a point where you meet? When you meet in Europe, maybe the rules are based on low context, and when you meet in Asia, it's the other way around. Does it influence something? Yeah.
Can I just share my opinion here?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
I think that's a really great question, because higher context people tend to be forced to adopt themselves into lower context culture, because it can be a lower context if there are lots of the nationality and different background people gathers, it tend to be lower context, right? While if the place is higher context, it's not really possible for the lower context people to adopt themselves. It's for the higher context, because they simply, as a reality, they don't share their context. So they don't know how to behave. Maybe they can if they prepare and learn and study up front. But in most cases, I would say it's just not easy to follow the local rule 100%, right? So I think in case of the higher context people to adopt themselves into the lower context, that's more realistic. The other way around can be a little bit unrealistic, to be honest. But in theory, I would say both are possible. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that, right? Because in a low context, if you say no, that means no, right? Regardless that it's a Germany or UK, US, no is no, right? But in Japan, like, I'll think about that. Probably it means no, right? But in the same high context country, but if somebody say, I'll think about that, it can be yes. So there's several different variations in the high context culture, but I think the low context culture relatively similar to each other, right? So it's easy to adapt low context culture if you have a lot of different background people.
Yeah. Also, we have several opinions or questions about that in the chat. People prefer low context. Is that right? Perhaps in diverse environments, low context is almost necessary. And I see lots of high context people struggle with low context culture. And from my research, I can definitely back up what Kay said, is that even though many people from high context cultures first struggle when they come into low context cultures, they adopt this style fairly easy, or they get used to it at least. The other way around, it's very, very difficult. And especially in diverse contexts, it's definitely what you said. So there are differences in high context cultures, low context cultures are also different, but they will express the difference. You will know what the difference is. They will say, oh, I don't think so. So this is definitely a thing. And it also depends a lot on the context of where you are. If you are the one Western person in Japan, you will have to adopt to the high context, right? So there's no way around that. But if it's a mixed context, or you come as a group, for example, and your guests, especially in Japan, they will try to adopt. Yeah.
And Vincent, I think you still have 3 topics you need to go through, so
Yeah.
we might need to hurry.
Yeah, we can come to that later again. Definitely.
Okay.
So let's move on. We have the next here, which would be the uncertainty avoidance index. I called this preparation as the key. And this one is maybe at first a little bit difficult to understand, and I often have to read up a note again when I'm looking at this concept. And it is the ability to cope with unknown situations without anxiety. This is not being afraid of the future. It's about how you perceive the future and how you prepare for it in a way. So you have the uncertainty accepting cultures, which would be unknown situations are expected without major anxiety and high acceptance of new ideas, and there are a lot of risk takers. A very good example here would be the US, for example. You have a lot of you have a quite young nation, and you have these Elon Musks, right? They take very high risks, very high rewards. I'll quickly check my notes here. And in these countries, the uncertainty is accepted, or they don't really care about it in a way. Obviously, they care, but they don't put too much thought into it. On the other hand, you have the uncertainty avoidant cultures. In this case, the society would feel threatened in a way. Threatened, I put very loosely here, by uncertainty in the future, which means just look at Japan, for example. You have a lot of catastrophes, natural disasters. So there is no way you will know when this happens. So what happens in these cultures is that there are a lot of internal structures. They tend to plan in detail. In Japan, you have a plan for everything. You have rules. You have a lot of structure. A very good indicator for this is actually a law system. I will quickly reveal Singapore as a very uncertainty accepting country. Germany somewhere in the middle, but also uncertainty avoidant. And Japan is one of the most uncertainty avoidant countries in the world. And a very good indicator for this would be, for example, the law system. Japan and Germany both have a civil law, which means you have one law which will be applied for different situations, while Singapore has a common law, like the US, for example. You have a precedence case, and that is applied to others. So the German law system, or the German-Japanese law system, is similar in a way. These uncertainty avoidant countries rely on expertise in a way, especially Germany. In Germany, expertise is the key. You need to have a paper, right? You need to have a title. If you don't have a title, you're out in a way. Sometimes, not everywhere, but yeah. While Japan, and I mentioned that there are a lot of rituals in everyday life. There are a lot of rules. And for example, punctuality is both in Japan and Germany very important. Yeah, so let's have a quick look at the chat. This is about the context. Let's come to that back later. How the various countries handle COVID is a clear indicator for uncertainty avoidance index. Exactly. Definitely something here. How structured is the approach to do that, which is interesting for Singapore, because in Singapore it's a bit counterintuitive, but I will explain that a little bit later. But the reason you would say Singapore has a lot of rules, right? Singapore, there are many rules, people follow them. I heard the term Singapore is a fine country, you will get a fine for everything. So, but this already indicates a little bit that these rules, they're not coming from the society. They're imposed on the people, right? A Singaporean friend of mine, he actually told me there are rules and there are rules, and some rules are not that important, even though they are there. The difference to Japan, for example, is that these rules are not exposed by the society. You are not getting punished by the society. So in uncertainty avoiding countries, these rules come from the society. So in Japan, you don't necessarily need a written rule to have something done, especially when you come back to the context again. But on the other hand, in Japan, when a new rule is exposed, so for example, let's look at rules regarding overwork. In the office I worked, we had the non-overwork Wednesday, I think it was. And what people did, they turned off the lights and half an hour later, they turned it on again. So it's because the society is not accepting this rule, even though it is there. In Singapore, it would probably be different. In Singapore, the people would stick to that rule because if they don't, they get fined. Existence of written rules and unwritten rules will be funny factor for context, I think. Exactly.
Yeah, Vincent, just for probably the audience perspective, so this evaluation or ranking are not your ranking, right? It's based on some research, right?
Exactly. This is based on also the uncertainty avoidance index, and the other two points we will have later, the 2 dimensions. These are 3 dimensions from the 6 so-called Hofstede dimensions, which were researched quite extensively. They were expanded over the years, not only by Hofstede, also by other people. And this is also what I initially based my research on and validated that in the in my thesis. So if you feel this may also be interesting, we already have some opinions doubting these scores in a way. If you feel that this is not correct, you may type it in the chat because it's culture is ever changing, right? And there may be some changes. So for example, I put in my notes, what about Twitter, right? If you violate a rule and the society will oppose it, what about cancel culture? If you do something and it's caught on video, even though it's just a small rule violation, are uncertainty accepting countries, which usually don't have these opposing rules, changing due to these social media? Because it will be called out on social media, you will be canceled in worst case. And the people will oppose these rules on you. This is something I thought about it. Okay. Any idea?
Well, one thing that I want to point it out is that the way we prepare this event is absolutely the reflection of the position of Japan and Germany here, because we lay out all the plans in a detail, how are we gonna use the time of the 60 minutes into which kind of section. And we actually plan 2 preparation sessions, right? If this is more like a Singaporean style, more Asian style, I guess like there might be even any preparation session. We just come up on the stage at the exact day and start like, okay, well, we're going to talk, right? So I think this is really one of the great example of the structure part, which you mentioned in the higher uncertainty avoidant cultures.
Exactly. I just saw the time and I'm already actually overshooting with this part of it. So I will go ahead now and we can come back to that later.
Yeah, we are all think about the time. Let's move on.
I will just reveal everything here. So the next one is individualism and collectivism. This basically is the idea of how a society thinks or how the individual is placed in the society. So for example, the collectivistic cultures, excuse me, think in we structures. They have the wider society in view, while the individual countries think more of I. So I as myself. People in this society, they focus more on themselves and their very close family. You see it here, the collectivistic countries are highly influenced by the Confucianism, which has the core principle to elevate the society as a whole on a higher level. So everyone has to work together in a way. while the individual countries is always about how can I become a better version of myself. Look at Germany, Japan, and Singapore here. You can see that Germany is by far the most individual country here. However, Japan is also quite individualistic, which may be surprising because you think Japan is quite collectivistic, right? How is that? So actually both countries here have a little bit of a special position, Japan perhaps more than Germany, because Germany is a individualistic country with collectivistic traits, and Japan is a collectivistic country with strong individual traits. Why is it for Japan? I may focus on that a little bit more because this, for me at least, is more interesting. So in Japan, even though it's a collectivistic country, the people are still encouraged to find their own way, right? It's, you focus more on your own family than the whole society. And a reason for this, and you may say, wait, what about the company? If you're working, it comes before, the work comes before your family in many points, right? The reason for that is actually, and this also plays into the individualistic point and not into the collectivistic point, is that the core structure or the very first structure of companies in Japan would be the ie, right? This is mainly based on farming families in rural or in old Japan. And in these years, only the oldest son, which doesn't even have to be the son of the farmer, it can also be an adopted son, would inherit the whole farm and everything around it. While the other sons, the daughters would marry someone, and the other sons would be encouraged to start their own ie. So go their own way, start their own thing. And this nowadays, so they have to find their own place in the society. And nowadays it's still the same. Even though you are very connected to your company and it is a part of like your family, you choose the company yourself, right? You go out there and choose it for yourself. Collectivism, that's something make problem. Yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, for Singapore is very, very influenced by Chinese culture, which in itself is obviously very, very influenced by Confucianism. So it's not surprising that it's quite collectivistic. I don't want to rush, but I want to carry on. I hope that is okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We can come back here later. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So the next one for me also quite interesting is the power distance, and it says we are not equal because we would have equal societies. These are terms I came up with just to prove a point. It would be high or low power distance in the common sense. And you have these equal societies where members of a society are seen equal in all aspects of life. And the unequal societies, I call them, in which power and wealth differences are expected and accepted. What does that mean? So if we look at the countries again, Japan is, again, surprising maybe, in the very middle. But you think in Japan, there are so strict hierarchies. Germany is to the left, which is unsurprising because we challenge a lot of leadership, right? We like to discuss. You have to convince us. If you have a strong union workers in Germany. So these are all traits of a very low power distance country. Why is Japan in the middle though? The hierarchies would indicate that it is a high power distance, right? You always have to go to your boss, you have to go to your kohai, you have senpai kohai. And Japan definitely has strong hierarchies, and they are very influencing. And this is why Japan is by Hofstede characterized as a borderline hierarchical society. Because the reason here is that if you are, for example, again in a company and you want something to be approved, you have a ringi system, you have the nemawashi. And these are indicators for lower power distance because you have to get the approval from everyone. there's not this one person, there's not the one king who says we do it like this and this is how it's done. You have to convince everyone. You have to go one time up the hierarchical ladder, and you have to go down again. So you have to incorporate many opinions. So this is definitely a point here. Also, a very strong point, in my opinion, is that in Japan, people would think, all right, if you're in school, you can work hard for good grades, and you can achieve everything, no matter in what circumstances you are born. Obviously, university costs money, but generally, if you work hard, you can achieve everything. You can become a CEO if you want. Anyway. So this is one of the points where I had a aha moment, right? I'm in Singapore for a few weeks only, so I don't have that much experience here, and I was looking for points to base these dimensions on for Singapore. And here something caught my eye, and it is the 5 shared values of Singapore defined by the government. I would assume not everyone knows them, especially people from Europe, so I will quickly read them out, and maybe you will also get the aha moment I had. There would be first, nation before society, society before oneself. Second, family as a basic unit of society. Third, community, support, and respect for individual. Fourth, consensus, not conflict. And fifth, religious and racial harmony. All right, we have 3 of the things we discussed in these rules alone. First, the power distance are in the first rule, nation before society, society before oneself. You have the nation above all. You have the nation above the society. So these are the leaders. You have the strong leaders who cannot challenge in a way. The way that you have these rules shows that you are in a relatively low context society. So you remember Singapore is a high context culture, but has not super high. So you have it lower than Japan. It's explicitly stated. If you would have these rules in Japan, I wouldn't expect them to be written down. And then you have the society as a whole in focus. You have the consensus, not conflict. You have community support and respect, which is a strong indicator for collectivism. So this is a good example of how everything ties together and how things are put into context. Yeah. Sorry, I was a bit fast here, but like I said, I want to have the open discussion with you guys as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Since I'm Japanese, I was just hesitating to stop you to move on to the second part. Right. I'm just waiting for the timing to jump in. All right. So we would like to make the floor open, and for anyone who